In the last video, I showed you how to calculate averages and standard deviations based on a data set within Excel. In this video, I'm going to show you how do you actually graph this data so that you can visualize it. Now, the type of graph that you choose is going to be dependent on the data that you're trying to display. For example, if you're trying to determine the growth of a microorganism over a period of time, then the best option would be to choose an XY scatter plot so that one can see the relationship between growth and time. But in this particular data set, we're really just comparing one single variable here, and that is the presence or the absence of a syringe filter. And our dependent variable, or what we've measured, is the amount of bacteria or the concentration of bacteria. So that's the data that I'm going to graph. To graph this data, I'm going to just go ahead and highlight these first. And then I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to go to Chart, and I'm going to select to do a column graph. Now, there are many different ways to get to this, but that's just one way you can do so. And there are many manipulations that you can do to it to change how it looks, to include labels if you'd like to, but those are ultimately your choices. If I wanted to put in labels here on the x-axis, such as pre-filter and syringe filter, then what I would end up doing is going to select data and change the horizontal axes labels here to pre-filter and syringe filter. And hit OK, and those pop up below. Another way that you can do this, if you don't want to type them in, is to hit this little button here and highlight the conditions or the data that you want to appear on the x-axis. And again, hitting OK will put those there. Now you can see in the way that this chart is being shown right now, or this graph is being shown, note that there is the difference between these two is somewhere on the order of about 10 to the 6th in terms of its difference. And so that's why we can't see any results for the syringe filter, because of how this axis is set up. Oftentimes when it comes to microbial growth, we are looking at log differences or tenfold differences. So what I'm going to show you here is a really quick trick that you can use to look at this graph on a log-based scale. First, I'm going to click on the vertical axis right here, and then if you have a Mac, you would perform a 2-finger click. If you have a PC, you might be using a right click. And what I'm going to do at this point is go to Format Axis. And over here is going to pop up my axis options. And what I'm going to do is set a logarithmic scale. And you'll see that the minimum is set to 1. So this would be 10 to the first, or I'm sorry, this is just 1, the value of 1. And the maximal is 8 times 10 to the 7th. I usually like to round these off to something of the power of 10. So I'm going to make this to the 8th. And at that point, hit enter, and now it has that axis set up for us on the y-axis here. So now, using this, we can actually see both the data from the syringe filter and the pre-filter. If you want, you're more than welcome to go ahead and put in the minor tick marks. And doing so allows you to see, I'm going to zoom in here real quick so you can see this. 1, this next tick mark is 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. Up here, 20, 30, 40, so on and so forth. And at this point then we can include labels by going to add a chart element and adding axis labels either on the x-axis, which in this case we really don't need one, or on the y-axis to label this as concentration of the bacterium in colony-forming units per milliliter. And that's how we perform the graph. Now the last piece here is, how do we actually graph those standard deviations? Well, at that point, we want to click on one of these bars, and that will highlight both of these data points in the series. And again, if we perform a two-finger click or a right click, we can go to Format Data Series. And that's going to pop up this information over here. And it doesn't seem I can find what I want over here, so instead I'm going to go to this Add Chart Element and go to Error Bars down here. And I'm going to choose More Error Bar Options. And I want to actually create my own based on the standard deviations that I've calculated. So I'm going to have mine go in both directions. I like mine with caps, but you may prefer them without. And if you go to Custom here and hit Specify Value, you can then highlight, there we go, highlight both of those standard deviations for the positive error bar or error value, and the same for the negative. And if I hit OK, it's going to tell me negatives can't be plotted on here, which is okay. But still, it's going to plot the positive and negative error bars on here for me. And just to make sure that that positive fits in the screen here, or at least on this chart, I'm going to raise this up to 10 to the 9th. And so there we go. So these error bars, as you can see them, show up in the positive and negative on this one. Down here, because you'll see the average is less than the standard deviation, on a logarithmic curve, negative error bars that drop below the value of 0 can't be shown. So it only shows us the positive error bar here. And if that's the case, just make sure you note it when presenting these graphs. So that's how to perform graphing of bar graphs and also to create error bars.